بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه الطيبين الطاهرين. Let's make our intentions sincerely for the sake of Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala. Do you remember last time we spoke about the ways into the body? We spoke about the open inlets. So let's mention some of the cases that pertain to this, or that questions that are usually asked about this matter. So the eye is not considered to be one of the open inlets into the body, which if something enters through it, the fast would be invalidated. So in other words, if something enters through the eye, then this does not invalidate the fast. So applying al-kuhul or putting eye drops in, this does not invalidate a person's fast. This is even if, on some occasions, if a person applies the eye drops or something enters the eye, they might find the taste. If they lift their head up like that for a while, they lay down, they might find that they can taste the drops in the back of the throat. Even if that is the case, this does not invalidate one's fast. So a person can do that. They can apply al-kuhul, as is sunnah, in their eyes, and they can also apply eye drops, because the eye is not a considerable open inlet into the body, even though it is open in that sense. You put eye drops in, they might end up in the back of your throat and you can taste it there. But this is not an Islamically considerable open inlet. The nose. So whoever sniffs or snorts something through his nostrils, such that it goes past the soft part of the nose. So this is the soft part of the nose. I'm showing you like this because the other way is to tell you hypothetically that if you were to put your little finger up your nose, how far would it go? Okay, as far as it goes usually, that is the soft part of the nose. So if you put water there, or you put a cotton bud there, or something that you might have a tissue over one of your fingers, if you put that there in the soft part of your nose, the fast is fine. The fast is not invalidated. What invalidates the fast if it goes beyond that. So like for example, if a person was to perform al-istinshaq, when they perform al-wudu, or they perform al-ghusl and they were to snort, they were to breathe the water up past the soft part of the nose, then this invalidates the fast. Because it goes past the soft part up to the hard part of the nose and beyond. This invalidates the fast. Likewise, if a person now, if they have nasal mucus. Do you remember when we mentioned about the mouth, that if a person has food in between their teeth, meat in between their teeth, and we get details. So now if a person has nasal mucus, in their nose, and they snort it in, they snort it upwards, then even if a person deliberately did that, this does not invalidate the fast, because it follows the judgment of one's saliva in the mouth. I remember when I was younger, what was I? Maybe 7. I was 7 years old. And some other students in school, they hadn't understood fasting, or they hadn't understood this rule. So they would tell us, I was fasting too, I imagine. And they were telling me that they were fasting, and while they were in class, they would hold their saliva in their mouth. Because they thought that swallowing the saliva, one's own saliva, invalidated the fast. Then when we would go out to play at playtime, we would go out to the playground, they would spit and spit and spit and spit and spit, because they thought that this invalidates the fast. That's ajib. If I start talking about food now, people start salivating. swallowing that saliva doesn't invalidate the fast, does it? Okay. So it follows the judgment of the mucus in the nose, follows the judgment of saliva in the mouth. The judgment of saliva in the mouth is that it can be swallowed, right? As long as it's not mixed. It might be mixed with blood, for example. Yeah, here a person doesn't swallow it. Might be mixed with something else. Like if a person chewed chewing gum. If they chewed the chewing gum and they didn't swallow any of the saliva that mixed in with that chewing gum, they didn't swallow it. Their fast is not invalidated. But if they swallowed that saliva, they let it go down, the fast would be invalidated because it's mixed with this chewing gum that is probably minty or whatever flavor it is. This would invalidate the fast. Now, the ears. So, whoever pours drops into their ears invalidates the fast. This is what the books of the scholars say. But let us give some details. So if someone was to actively pour into their ear something, then this would invalidate the fast. As for water, the scholars said that if a person, if water enters the ear by itself, this does not invalidate the fast. As for if someone inserted it into the ear, like they got water like this and they put it into the ear, then in this case there is a difference of opinion amongst the scholars. Some said it invalidates the fast, and some said that it does not invalidate the fast. So it only invalidates the fast, according to those that said it invalidates the fast, if it goes into the ear and it gets into the head or into the body cavity. And usually that does not happen. Usually that does not happen. So in that case, if a person was showering, just as normal, they were showering, they don't intend for the water to go inside the ear, for example, in a way that it would go, it would permeate the membrane in the ear and go into the head. No, they don't intend that, so their fast would not be invalidated. Next, whoever inserts an enema into the anus, which is because they are ill, so they need to do that as they are instructed to by their physician, then this medicine that is introduced into the anus, it would invalidate the fast. Because this part of the body is considered an open inlet. As for the urethra of the male, the urethra is the place where the urine comes from, where the urine exits from rather. So if a person was to inject drops of medicine into the urethra, this does not invalidate the fast. This is because they said that there is a barrier between the urethra and the inner part of the body. Remember, what invalidates the fast is if something enters the body cavity, the inner body, okay? Which we said, from the mouth, it's past the hat. If it goes into the mouth and past the hat, then this would be considered to be inside the body cavity. As for if someone put a stone on their tongue, this doesn't invalidate the fast because it didn't go into the inner body cavity. So if a person was, if a male was performing an istinja and they felt that water went into the urethra because they were cleaning themselves, this doesn't invalidate the fast. Vomiting. If somebody was to vomit, they saw something, they saw a corpse, they saw a dead rat, or because they came out of the shower and it was sunny and this affected them and they felt nauseous and they were sick. They were sick 7 times, 8 times, 9 times. Nothing was left in the stomach. This doesn't invalidate the fast. What invalidates the fast is if a person induces vomit. If a person puts their finger in their mouth and they make themselves gag and they induce vomit, if the vomit was a mouthful. I'll give you two examples that will show you the difference. If a person puts a feather on their tongue, or they touch their tongue until they touch it at the back and they begin to gag. Such a person, let's say the first person, person A, vomited. Okay? Something came up. But they were able to hold it in their mouth. That tells you that it was a small amount of vomit. Right? If they were able to hold it in their mouth, then they spat it out. This person, although they induced the vomit, this would not invalidate the fast. Another person, let's say person B, induced the vomit. They made themselves vomit by putting something in their mouth. They started to vomit. Now, had they tried to close their mouth and keep it in, right, they would not be able to. Had they tried to close their lips, very tight even, they would not be able to. This is what is expressed as being a mouthful. A mouthful of vomit is the vomit that a person could not have kept in had they tried. If a person tries on some occasions, if there's a lot of vomit that's coming, that's in the pipeline, if it's coming and a person closes their mouth, you know what happens? You know what happens if they try to close it really tight? It comes out of your nostrils. And I've seen that happen. So this would, of course, be something that invalidates the fast if it was induced, number one, and it was a mouthful. If one was overcome by vomit, then it does not invalidate the fast. If someone vomits, if someone was to vomit naturally, without inducing it, and some of it returns, so this is a new case now. Somebody vomits naturally, so they didn't induce it. And then, after they vomited, it might not all have come out. Okay? And some of it, after it's come back past the hat, into the mouth, it goes back in. Then, if it was less than a mouthful, then it does not invalidate the fast. This case about a person vomiting and then some of it going back, it has many details. But for now, we will stick to this. That if a person vomited naturally and some of it went back down, then if it was the equivalent of a mouthful, then it would invalidate the fast. Injections. Injections, they come through the skin. The skin is not a religiously, Islamically considerable open inlet. Which means if something goes through the skin into the body cavity, then this does not invalidate the fast. Whether that was via an injection or it was through the pores. People, they apply creams, don't they? They apply different types of oil to the body. And this oil, some of it remains on the surface, some of it dries, and some of it goes in through the small holes that are present on a person's skin. These holes are not religiously considerable open inlets to the body. So it means even if something goes through these these pores, this does not invalidate the fast. People usually ask about al-hijama, cupping. If a person does it, this does not invalidate the fast. Something's coming out of the body. Okay, blood is coming out of the body. Likewise, people have asked in the past, can I give blood while I am fasting? They said, I ask because a person is pricked with a needle that enters the skin. So they're asking about the needle itself. Does it invalidate the fast? We said, no, the skin is not an Islamically considerable open inlet. So giving blood in this way does not invalidate the fast. Right. Who is allowed not to fast? Okay, there are some details that pertain to this. Number one, if someone is ill, this is the person who is allowed not to fast. Okay? If someone is ill in Ramadan, so if you are ill, let's say, tomorrow, and you fear that if you fast, your illness will become more severe. People in general, they have a general understanding of their own body. Because of the Ramadans that they have experienced in the past, a person knows how they feel, how they generally will feel. A person knows, if I eat this, it's going to cause me this. If I eat that, it's going to cause this. So if a person fears that if I fast today or tomorrow, then one, my illness will become more severe, they're allowed not to fast. Or they fear that fasting will slow down my recovery, they're allowed not to fast. This person in these two situations would be excused. And so if they do not fast, which is fine, later they need to make this day up. And of course they are not sinful. They need to perform qada for this day. But a person, in order for them to determine whether their illness will become more severe or not, there are certain matters that they need to consider. Firstly, they need to rely on the fact that, okay, it's most likely that my illness will become more severe. This is the criteria. So if they're 50-50, maybe, maybe not, then no. They have to have in their mind that it's most likely that my illness, my condition will worsen if I fast. Secondly, it may be the case that they have experience with themselves. They know about themselves that if they fast, they will become severely ill, even more than they are now. Or an upright Muslim informs them that if they fast, then this illness will become more severe. Like a talented doctor, a trustworthy doctor. When we say trustworthy here, it's important to mention that what is meant is Islamically trustworthy. So you might have a person who you can tell a secret to and you trust them not to tell anybody else. But that doesn't always mean that they are Islamically trustworthy. To give you an example, Islamically, a person who doesn't pay a zakah, that is obligatory upon them, they are not Islamically trustworthy. So there are certain roles that cannot be given to this person, Islamically. Likewise, the person who, let's say, is an enormous sinner because they do not treat their parents, the Muslim parents, well. They harm their Muslim parents in a way that is a major sin. Such a person is not Islamically trustworthy. A person who doesn't pray the obligatory prayers is not considered Islamically trustworthy. You remember how we had mentioned in one of the sessions previously that a person, if the Khalifa, the ruler, is to take by their saying as to have them having seen the moon, they need to be trustworthy. So a person who sees the moon but is a major sinner, then the Khalifa would not take by their saying. They are not considered Islamically trustworthy. Even though for themselves they would have to fast, of course. So like this, we're talking about a trustworthy physician. Someone who is religiously trustworthy. The first condition of that is that a person has to be a Muslim. So if a person who is a trustworthy physician and is outwardly upright, someone whose private matters are not known, if such a person tells you that fasting will result in severe illness, then you are allowed not to fast. Okay, we are going to speak about, a little later, about the one who is suffering from an illness that they don't believe they will recover from. That is coming. We're going to mention it soon. The second person who is allowed not to fast is the one that is traveling. So now this requires us to mention who the traveling person is. If a person was traveling approximately 53 miles, so from their town or city, when the buildings separate, from where the buildings separate, to their destination, where they enter the confinement of that town or city, if there is a distance of about 53 miles, then this is one detail that is fulfilled for them to be a traveler. There are other details that I'm going to mention. But that's one thing. If a person is traveling 40 miles, then they're not Islamically a traveler. If they're traveling 30 miles, Islamically they would not be considered a traveler. This matter of traveling is important because religious rules pertain to it. Like, for example, the prayer. The 4 rak'ah prayer becomes 2 rak'ahs. And there are rules pertaining to fasting also. So a person needs to identify what a traveler is. If someone was traveling approximately 53 miles, and secondly now, they exited their hometown before Al-Fajr. So they exited their hometown during which prayer time? No. During which prayer time? Al-Isha. So before Fajr. So before Fajr is what? Is Al-Isha, right? So they need to have exited. So they've intended, I'm traveling like from here. Traveling from here to London. Right? It's easy. It's more than 50 miles, about 200 miles. Okay? So for them to be considered a traveler in terms of the fast, they need to have exited before Al-Fajr. So let's say Al-Fajr was at 4 a.m. and we wanted to go to London. So we've ticked the first box, it's already more than 53 miles. So we would have to set off before Al-Fajr comes in. So let's say we set off at 3 a.m. Fajr is at 4, let's say. We set off at 3 a.m. and we exited the boundaries of Huddersfield, which was, let's say, our hometown. We exited the boundary, we got on the motorway, okay? The buildings from one town to the other have separated. We're not going local, we're going via the motorway. We got onto the motorway, we've left Huddersfield behind, and Fajr is not in yet. So now, according to the fasting of the next day, we are considered travelers. The judgment here is that now I am allowed not to fast. I'm allowed not to fast that day. When Fajr comes in, I will pray Al-Fajr. Then the sun after that will come up. I will pray Al-Dhuhr. I will pray Al-Dhuhr 2 rak'ahs because I'm a traveler. Then I will pray Al-Asr 2 rak'ahs because I would have got to London by now, I imagine, right? But let's say I'm going slow. Okay, there's a lot of congestion on the motorway. So I would pray Al-Asr 2 rak'ahs also. But that day, I'm allowed to eat. I'm allowed to eat. I've even packed sandwiches for the ride. So I'm allowed to eat. Now, what's better? It's better for me to fast though. Allah revealed in the Quran, وَأَن تَصُومُوا خَيْرٌ لَكُمْ. And for you to fast is خَيْرٌ لَكُمْ. Is better. Why? Because you endure hardships while you're traveling. It's difficult. Yes, we don't go via camel or donkey now, but still, traveling, it's not easy, right? Subhanallah. You have luggage sometimes, you want to go to the airport, you're driving in one position. I mean, for the driver and the passenger, it's hard. So there is hardship involved, and if a person fasts, there is more reward involved. But a person is allowed not to fast. A person remains a traveler for about 14 days. For about 14 days, a person can remain a traveler. So for example, let's say I have relatives in London. So today, I want to go to London from Huddersfield, and Huddersfield is my hometown. So I pray Al-Fajr, and then I set off to London. How many rak'ahs of Dhuhr will I pray? Obligatory rak'ahs? 2. Am I allowed in this situation not to fast? No. Why? Yeah, because I prayed Fajr in Huddersfield, and then I decided to travel. Here I have to fast. Oh, but it's 4 hours, 5 hours to London. Yeah, but you're traveling after Fajr. If you want to not fast, if you want that ease that Allah Ta'ala created, that felicity, if you will, then you have to travel before Al-Fajr. Okay? Likewise, for example, a person says, well, I'm traveling to, where are we traveling? We're traveling to somewhere far, let's say. China. We're going to China. We're going past Pakistan and India. We're going to China. When's your flight? 2:30 p.m. Oh, Dhuhr time. Okay. So when are you heading off to the airport? They say about 3 hours before, don't they? So at 11, we're setting off from Huddersfield at, let's say, 10 a.m. 10 a.m. We're going to Manchester Airport. Right. Am I allowed to not fast this day? No, I have to fast. Because at Fajr, what was I doing? At Fajr, or just before Fajr, what was I doing outside at home? Munching. Sahur. What was I doing at Fajr? I prayed in my house. Then what did I do? I slept. Then what did I do? I woke up at 9 a.m. still at home. Okay? Then at 10 o'clock, I made my way. I became a traveler in terms of my prayers. But in terms of the fasting, no, I wasn't a traveler before Fajr. So I'm going to be fasting. And I've made my way to Manchester Airport. I've checked in. I've gone through security. I've waited at the lounge. I've waited at the gate. I've gone onto the plane. The plane was delayed. It took me, I don't know how many hours it takes to get to China. 9 hours to get to China. And so on. And I have to fast. When the sun sets, then when I believe that the sun has set in the location that I am in, even if I'm on the plane, then I will, of course, break my fast. I will eat, because the Maghrib is in, and so on. But I'm not allowed from the beginning not to fast, because the criterion is that if I'm allowed to, I am allowed to break my fast, or not fast from the beginning, if I travel before Fajr. Okay? In the past, there'd be people that would say, we're going to Birmingham today, so we're not fasting. When you say off, setting off for Asr. You're setting off for Asr time and you're not fasting? Come on. Okay? This is what sometimes would happen in the past. So a person, let's say they were going to London. I'm going to London. And I've set off before Fajr. Fajr is at 4. I'm setting off at 3:30 a.m. And I've eaten sahur. If I want to fast. Let's say I don't want to fast, because it's going to be tough. And I am staying in London, so I begin my day, Fajr comes in, and I'm eating and so on, I'm drinking, and but I'm shortening my prayers. On the way to London, I'm eating and drinking and so on. On that day, I didn't fast. It was better for me to fast, but I thought it would be difficult for me, if for example, I've got my parents, my wife, for example, there are children with us, and it's going to be tough for me. So I'm allowed not to fast on that first day. I'm allowed, because I'm intending to stay 13 days in London. 13 days. I'm allowed not to fast the second day, and the third day, and the 4th day, and the 5th day, and I'm allowed not to fast for those 13 days, because I'm Islamically a traveler. But usually, once you're there, after that first day, it's pretty relaxed when you're somewhere else, whether it's a hotel or it's a friend's house, a relative's house, it's relatively relaxing, right? So a person would fast. But this judgment applies to the prayers. This person would shorten their prayers for that amount of time, for 13 days. This male would not have to attend the Jumu'ah for that amount of time, because they're a traveler for all of that time. But it would be better to fast. Nowadays, if a person was in a situation where they went to a relative's house for 2 weeks, or they were for 12 days, let's say, it's strange for a person not to fast. If you ask them, so you're not fasting? No, I'm a traveler. Hey, you've been asleep all day. It's not like there's any hardship involved. Okay? You've been asleep all day. You slept at Sahur, you woke up just before Maghrib. So it's not tough. So a person usually wouldn't do that. But there may be situations where a person is traveling for a particular purpose that requires them to be moving around and. They're not at home. So a person could refrain from fasting because they are a musafir, they're a traveler. But it is better for a person to fast. If the aforementioned ill person and the traveling person were to die while in this state, they are not obligated to make up the fast. So here there is this ill person or this traveling person who is not fasting because they're ill or because they are traveling. So if they die while they are not fasting, then someone might say, well, how would they have made it up anyway? They would have died. So here the ill or the traveling person who is not fasting would not be obligated. What it means is they would not be obligated to tell someone to make this day up for them if they die by feeding some poor people. For example, I'm going to London again, okay? And I'm not fasting today because I left before Al-Fajr and I'm traveling the traveling distance. I'm not fasting today. Right. I am not obligated to send someone a message or ring them and tell them, Assalamu alaikum, mom or dad or whoever, or my sibling, I'm not going to be fasting today. So just in case, because look, if I was not to fast that day, right, I have to make it up later on, don't I? Right? But I'm not obligated to ring somebody and tell them or write somewhere that I'm not fasting today, I'm going to London, and in case I die, then I want you to feed some poor people on my behalf because I'm not able to make this day up. No, I don't have to do that. This is because the person did not live to a day on which they could have fasted and then they fell short. Likewise, the one who is not well in the way that we previously mentioned is not obligated to say to his family members at his bedside, I am not fasting today. And because if I fasted, it would make my situation worse. So if I die, make this day up for me by feeding some poor people from my money. He's not obligated to do that. Why? Because this person originally didn't even live to a day where they could have made up that day. But let's flip the situation a little bit. Let's see. If the ill person is cured, or the traveler becomes a resident, and then they die, then they are obligated to make up the time that is equivalent to the time that they were better and the time that they were a resident. So let's see. If a person was ill and then they were cured, they didn't fast that day. They didn't fast that day and then they fasted the next days and so on. Then on the day of Eid they can't fast. they've got that qada to make up, right? They didn't make it up after Eid, 2 days past, 3, it's day 4 of Shawwal, 6, 7, 8, and so on. They didn't fast that. So days passed when they could have fasted. But they did not. Then this person is obligated to tell someone to feed the poor people from their money if they die before then. Otherwise, this person's fasting will be left. That day that they owe, they will be indebted to Allah Ta'ala. They'll be in debt. Like the person that prays and misses an obligatory prayer. This is a debt that they need to make up. So this person was obligated to make these fasts up, but he did not. And they must be made up. He needs to make this debt up. So he needs to tell someone to make these fasts up by feeding poor people from his money, in the situation that he dies before making them up. Otherwise, how would a person know? Imagine I missed a fast. Because I was traveling, I had a valid excuse. I was traveling. Then after that, after I fasted the rest of the days, and 2 months later, after Shawwal, after Al-Hajj even, I hadn't made that day up. And I died. How would anybody know that I missed a fast? I'm obligated to make that fast up. How would anybody know I've missed it? So I'd have to tell somebody that such and such, these amount of days I haven't fasted. I'm working on it. I'm working on making these fasts up. What should a person do? They should make those fasts up as soon as they can. Why put it in somebody else's lap? Why put oneself in that situation? If one is able, then fast. Make those fasts up. And the same for the one who missed a fast while traveling. Okay. Let's talk now about a person who is suffering from an illness. And this person does not have any hope of them becoming better. Because that condition usually is such that people don't get better. That's what it means that they don't have hope. They don't think they're going to get better. Okay? Such a person who doesn't think that they are going to get better, they would, if they are not an elderly person, then this person would not give a fidya. Some scholars originally said that if a person is ill and they are not they're not old. Why do I mention the people that are old? Because someone who is old, they won't fast. Is it because they're ill? No, it's because they're elderly. So let's exclude that case for now. We're talking about people who have an illness without which they could fast. Okay? Such a person would not pay a fidya, according to some of the scholars, or according to the school of Al-Imam Abu Hanifa originally. This case is not to be found in their books. It doesn't exist. Later scholars came and said, well, such a person, if we use comparative analogy, if we look at the elderly person who has to give a fidya, then if we compare this person to that person, well, they don't fast because they're elderly, they don't fast because they're ill, we'll say it's good for this person also. We'll say, well, this person is obligated to also give a fidya, to pay an expiation, which is, nowadays, its monetary value is about £5 to £6. Giving £5 or £6 for each day that was not fasted, this would suffice. Perhaps it would be a little more. Every year one has to calculate how much the fidya is, because prices go up and down. Prices of wheat and barley and so on, they go up and down. Cost of living goes up as well. So a few years ago, it would have been around £3. That would have been enough for every day. But now it's gone up. And you want to be safe as well, so you add a little bit. Then you have the old person, whether it was a male or a female. An old person who was not able to fast because of them being an elderly person. This person is actually not allowed to fast because they would be harming themselves by doing that. So they are obligated to pay a fidya in place of not fasting. So a person can feed 2 poor people 2 meals every day. This is originally how it would be done before people started giving it as the monetary value. They would find 2 poor people, 2 destitute people, two among the miskeens. And these people are known as the penniless poor people. They have nothing. A person would feed such a Muslim 2 meals, 2 simple meals, every single day. They would feed one miskeen 2 meals every single day, or give them its equivalent in monetary value. So it was around £3 for each fast, the equivalent. If you think about it now, a simple meal, if we raise it to £5 now or £6, you think about it, you can easily get 2 reasonable meals for about £6. If it was known that such a person had fasts to make up, but did not tell anyone, but this person did not tell anyone to feed the poor on his behalf, after he dies, it's not obligatory upon the inheritors to feed the poor people on his behalf. However, if they wanted to do that, then it is permissible. So this person fell short because they had fast, this elderly person had fast to make up, which they missed when they actually could have fasted. They didn't fast it. This person then, after getting older, didn't tell anybody, I have missed fasts. Here, after they pass away, the inheritors, let's say they knew of that. Somehow they knew of that. They would not be obligated to fast. They would not be obligated, to feed poor people on that person's behalf. But it is permissible. They could if they wanted to. Likewise now, the pregnant woman or the mother that was breastfeeding her child, if they fear for themselves, the pregnant woman fears that if I fast, it's going to harm me. It's going to harm me. And she's pregnant. It's going to harm me. It's going to weaken me severely and. Or the breastfeeding woman also, she fears for her own health. Or the pregnant woman fears for the child, that if I fast, my child that is in her womb would be affected. Or the breastfeeding woman also, she fears that her child would be affected because she might not produce what she wants to give the child. So if a breastfeeding woman feared for her child, whether her child was her own biological child or she was breastfeeding someone else's child, she was appointed to breastfeed someone else's child, or she feared for herself, not for the child but for her own health, or the pregnant woman feared for herself, or the pregnant woman feared for her child. In all these cases, these women are allowed not to fast. And then they are obligated to make this fast up. And there is no expiation. So by this we come to the end of the details of the chapter of fasting. There are more details, but these are, if a person has specific questions about a situation that was not mentioned in this summary, let's say, then they would have to ask about their specific situation. The scholars, when they mentioned these details, they didn't fully encompass all of the different scenarios and cases. They mentioned the bullet points, and then after that, if somebody had a situation that was personal to them that wasn't mentioned, then they would ask about it. Next, there were some questions that were asked. Some about fasting and some more general. Inshallah, if we have time. We have time, don't we? We've got about 10 minutes. Is that right? I'll go through some of these, inshallah ta'ala. Someone asked, what should a person do if their sins, and this is asked quite a lot by a lot of people, what should a person do if their sins still haunt them, despite one having asked for forgiveness? This person should know that if a person has repented in the proper way, then they have been forgiven. And for a person to continually, even after that, regret what they have done, what they had done, i.e. that they had disobeyed Allah, this is something that is good. For a person to regret that they disobeyed Allah, tabaraka wa ta'ala. Here it says that the sins still haunt them. If I've understood correctly, and if this means that this person always regrets, always feels that, subhanallah, I fell into those sins. I used to do that sin, or I used to fall into that sin. If I've understood correctly, that this is what is intended by the question, then this is something that is not dispraised. This is actually something that is good. A person should regret that they committed that sin, and this would help a person in the future not to commit that sin again. One of the questions is home insurance permissible? When it comes to the matters of insurance in general, because we are living in a non-Muslim country and the rules that govern us are the rules that are man-made rules that have been put together by non-Muslims according to a system that is not an Islamic system, and these rules change like the weather. They're not like Islamic law, that it was revealed to Prophet Muhammad alayhi salatu wasalam, and it's very clear. So because we live in such a land, there are certain things that we are, let's say, for want of a better word, forced into. These matters that we are made to do, otherwise we would face imprisonment or harm, fines, so financial harm. These things that where our hand is forced, we are allowed to do the bare minimum. We are allowed to do the bare minimum to push away the harm that would come from not doing it. So we're allowed to do the bare minimum. As for, this transaction of insurance, originally, it is not permissible. Originally. But when it comes to cars and so on, it's something that you cannot drive without. And if a person is caught, then the person would be harmed, they would be fined, and perhaps the car would be impounded, and. So for that reason, in this situation, a person is allowed to do the least which would protect them from that harm. Now, as for voluntary insurance, because originally this transaction is impermissible, voluntary insurance is not permissible. Likewise, for example, once the question was asked about people who live in a country, who was asked about California actually. I used to go to California quite a bit. And there they have something called earthquake insurance. Because they have, in California, they have the San Andreas fault, don't they? Anyway, there are a lot of earthquakes there. So people voluntarily, they pay money in case an earthquake occurs. Then if it occurs, then the insurance company pays for the damages. Now this, because it's voluntary, it's not something that the government makes them do. This is impermissible. And like that, you can compare it to other examples. You can compare it to other scenarios. So is home insurance something that the government makes people do? You will have your answer to that. Next it says, is it permissible for a woman to take contraception? For a female to completely surgically remove the reproductive faculty, this is haram. This is something that is impermissible. For it to be permanent, this is haram. Why? Because فيه تغيير لخلق الله. There is something in the religion known as التغيير في الخلقة. For a person to change the original form upon which they were created, this is impermissible. This is when there is no need for that, when a person doesn't need to do that. Like, I'll give you an example. Some people, they undergo a rhinoplasty, which is basically an operation of the nose. And they do that for beautificatory purposes. There's no Islamic need for that. Some people, they have, for example, a deviated septum, right? They can't breathe out of one nostril properly. So they might have an operation on the nose, and they might have to reshape the nose slightly. That's fine, because there's a need. As for when it's for what's known as beautification, and usually it's women, it's not men. I've not heard of many men who try to do that. This is impermissible, because this operation, this dealing, it contains changing the way, the form that a person was originally created upon. And it contains also causing oneself unnecessary pain. They have a special type of hammer that obviously they numb a person first, they have a special type of hammer with which they break parts of the nose. And then after that they have to wear something that's equivalent to a nose mask for the next 2 or 3 weeks, and they're excruciating pain. Some people might even take medicine so that they don't sneeze. So this is something that is impermissible because it's changing the original form a person was created on. Same here. If a female was to be permanently sterilized or to remove the uterus itself when there was no need for it, then this is haram. As for if it was temporary contraception, then that is permissible. But also one needs to be aware that there are some things that are available for women to do nowadays where the only way that they could do that surgically is if they reveal part of their unlawful nakedness, which is not permissible. And if there isn't a dire need for that, which usually there isn't, like if she doesn't do it, she's going to die, then it's not permissible. Otherwise, temporary sterilization or contraception in the form of maybe a pill or something like that, then this is something that is not haram. It's not haram. Someone said, I get a lot of waswas from the devil about doubting in my belief in God, but I always try not to think about them, and I perform a dhikr. Is there a way to put a stop to it? This is a test from Allah, Tabaraka wa Ta'ala. One of the things that our teachers always say is the advice that the Prophet gave, alayhi salatu wasalam. He said, فَلْيَقْطَعْ. He said, cut it. Meaning, a person shouldn't dwell on these things that the devil whispers. Like the devil might whisper something to a person. The devil might say, does Allah exist? The Muslim repels it straight away. Doesn't think about it, doesn't dwell on it. Some people, what might they try to do? They try to go back and forth with themselves. They'll say, yes, Allah exists because of this and this and this and this. And then they'll get another question that comes to their heart. The devil injects another question. And they might try to answer. And then they get to a point where they think, oh, I don't know the answer to that one. Does that now mean that I've become like this, or I'm doubting my belief? And they go on. The Prophet said, alayhi salatu wasalam, فَلْيَقْطَعْ. A person cuts it out from the very beginning. A person ignores it. How long will the devil stay whispering to a person? The devil gets bored. So a person cuts it out. A lot of people are able to cure themselves through willpower and following the pattern. They are able to cure themselves. They're able to bring themselves out of this state. So a person needs to have the confidence to ignore. This is huge, actually. A person needs to have the bravery and the confidence to ignore. And a person shouldn't go weak at the knees if the devil comes again and again and again. A person shouldn't think, oh, there was something wrong with me. No, it's the devil who is injecting these thoughts. So what you need to do is continue repelling them, continue repelling them, continue repelling them. And eventually, it will go away. Eventually, a person will be sitting there, they'll be sitting with their children and with their family, and then it will cross their minds, you remember when I used to get those thoughts? A'udhu billah. But what I did was, I cut those thoughts out, and now I'm fine. And this is the story for many people. They need to find that inside themselves. Do not sit alone. Do not sit by yourself. Try to sit with people. Try to engage in an act of worship or have a hobby. Have something that requires your attention, physically and mentally. Shaykh Abdullah, our Shaykh, when he found some people complaining about this, he said to them, I want you to memorize 200 lines of poetry a day. 200 lines of Islamic knowledge written in the form of poetry. He said, I want you to memorize 200 lines a day. Some people looked at him like, we can't memorize 10 a day. You want 200? But then they tried. They might have done 40 a day, 60 a day, but it busied them. He sometimes wake them up in the night and say to them, read what you recite what you've learned. He'd keep them busy, he'd keep them on their toes. They'd stay worried. They'd forget about these issues. There are some other questions, but we don't have time right now. Inshallah, another time, if it's me or somebody else, we will try to answer these questions, inshallah ta'ala. Next week, there isn't going to be a lesson. So just make a note of that. Barakallahu bikum. And you will get an update anyway on the community. You'll get a message reminding you that there is no lesson. Okay, we'll stop here. Let's say La ilaha illallah and as-salah ala nabi. La ilaha